Well, the war probably the least known and most misunderstood of all the various nationalities in Burma, in Myanmar. And of course I knew a little bit about them because I spent 6 months with the Communist Party of Burma in 86, 87. The vast majority of the CPB's troops were Wa, ethnic Wa. And I spent, as you know, months out in the field with those troops. And I got to know them quite well. I could speak some broken Shan, they could speak broken Shan too, so we could communicate. And I realized that these guys are not communists. They don't even know what that is. And they're here, they have guns because they want to defend what they see as their homeland. And the communists gave them guns, and that's why they're having them. But on the other hand, they were very badly treated by the top leadership. It was mostly, aging Burman intellectuals who had gone underground in the late 40s, early 50s. And they treated the Wa as cannon fodder. And I knew the resentment that existed among the Wa. I wrote about these ethnic tensions in the CPB. And I even said that there might even be a mutiny unless they take these issues more seriously. And I heard afterwards, and of course there was a mutiny in 1989. The rank and file, most of the Wa, they kicked out all these old Burmese communists. They kicked them across the border into China, where they ended up in exile. And I actually did meet some CPB guys in Kunming years after this. And they actually said, and I appreciate that, they said that, look, when we first read what you wrote about your trip and your impressions of us, we were very upset. We thought you had violated, your hospitality and so on. But if you're taking what you wrote a little bit more seriously, maybe we could avoid what happened in 1999 could have been avoided. I don't think they could have been avoided. But at least they had by then realized that they had treated the Wa very badly. And that's the reason why they rose up. There were other reasons too. The opium factor was one. There were many other CPB commanders, mostly ethnic Chinese Kokang, were involved in the opium trade. And the party leadership wanted to stop that. So they were certainly on the side of the mutineers as well. And then, of course, the Chinese were not happy with the CPB either because they were still stuck in the Cultural Revolution. They became a totally anachronistic phenomenon which didn't really fit into China's new worldview. So I think the Chinese basically told the Wa to go ahead and kick them out. Because once they were in on the Chinese side of the border, the old leaders, the Chinese took care of them and gave them pensions and put them up in apartments in Kunming and so on, and looked after them. But anyway, I always wanted to go back to the Wa area. And it was very easy to dismiss them as drug traffickers, which they were, or that they were sort of Chinese puppets, which I didn't think that they were. And I've written a lot about the involvement in the drug trade, naturally, because I had to. And I know that they were not happy about that. In fact, they were quite hostile. But I did manage to get through to the top leadership and said, look, I would like to go to your area and see for myself what it's like. And I know that what I've written about you is, always been happy with it, but I never had a chance to talk directly to your leaders. And I would like to do that. So then they agreed. Getting there was a problem too, because I couldn't go through Burma naturally. I couldn't go through China. So I went with two friends. A Taiwanese businessman who has actually been involved with the tea industry there for a while. And a wildlife protection activist from Australia. We thought wildlife protection would be an interesting, something very important in that part of the country. So anyway, we went by river boat on the Mekong. We crossed into Laos, got visas on arrival in Laos. And then we went by boat, slept one night on the boat, continued up to a place called Suploy, which is beyond government control areas. And then the Wa picked us up there in a truck with armed escorts and so on. And we drove to Pangsang. In 1987, I had walked the same route from Pangsang to the Mekong River. That took me about 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Now we went by in a pickup truck 6 or 7 hours. I mean, the development that happened after the mutiny was absolutely astounding. And of course, it had not been possible without a lot of investment from China. roads and bridges and new towns. Well, there were probably towns there. There were not towns when I was there during the CBB days. Not even the Pangsang could be said to be a town. So we arrived in Pangsang, and I remember the first meeting with the leaders. We arrived quite late at night in Pangsang. The next morning we were taken to a meeting hall, and everybody was there except Pao Chang, the top leader, because he is suffering from brain disease, so he can't really concentrate. But he sent his greetings. But everybody else was there. So I said, first of all, I don't speak Chinese, and Chinese was spoken here, so my friend from Taiwan helped me with translations. I said, I'm very honored to be here because you have allowed me to come to your area and see for myself what it's like here. And for me, it's also a very personal thing because this is where my daughter took her first steps and said her first words. Because we were here, as you know, back in the 1980s. Then one of the CBB leaders suddenly said, "Yeah, I was in your escort, I said, "What?" yeah, I was a young soldier in those days. They picked you up in Kokang and we escorted you to Mung Mao. And I said, "Yes, sure." And he then just been a soldier in the military, and now he was one of the top leaders. So I had brought several the Burmese translation of not the Burmese translation, the Chinese translation of Land of Jade. It's been published in Taiwan. So I gave him a copy of that, and we had a picture taken together. And he was sure he remembers everything, where we'd been, the villages we went through, and stuff like that. Yeah, and I found they were very willing to give their side of the story. It doesn't mean that there was nothing that they didn't try to hide. Of course they were. And then they also got their own television station called Wild State TV. But it's fairly sophisticated, really. And they wanted to make the program about my visit there. So I said, that's fine, but don't show it until I'm back in Thailand, because I don't want the Burmese government to know that I'm here. So they did, and they sent me an internet link to the program afterwards. It was quite fascinating, because they said a friend of the Wa people returns after 32 years. Anyway, so this made it possible for me to write this book about the Wa, which I actually been working on for quite some time, but I've not been able to be back to the Wa area, of course I was there in the 80s in the CBB days, but now I was able to go back there again. And my understanding is that the book is in English, and I sent it back to the Wa, and they're actually quite happy with it. Even though I wrote about, for instance, the involvement in the drug trade and that sort of thing. And I think that one of the reasons why they appreciate what I wrote in the book was that I wrote things about their relationship with China which they could not write themselves. How they were treated, how the Wa in China were treated in the 1950s, for instance, which was bad, to put it mildly. They burned the old drum houses, the old villages, and forced them into people's communes, and be totally alien to Wa society and that sort of thing. They never said it openly, but I could see that in private discussions that they are not the kind of Chinese puppets that people believe that they are. They are far more independent in their outlook, and also that they are totally dependent on China. That's true. But there's no way they could survive without China. They use Chinese money up there, they have Chinese mobile phones, Chinese internet and everything. And all the building construction material, everything comes from China. They export that to China. Rare earth metals, tin, and other sources of income, which I think have become more important than drugs, really. If there was a government in power in Burma with a more enlightened approach to the ethnic minorities, I don't really like the term ethnic minorities, because they're not a minority in the area where they live. Let's say the non-Burma nationalities. With a more enlightened approach to the non-Burma nationalities, I don't think it would be too difficult to get the Was on board as well, if we just treated them with respect and listen to what they have to say, what they want, the grievances and so on.